I pretended to be a poor mother when I met my daughter-in-law's family. What I discovered that night left me absolutely shocked. I never thought keeping a secret could feel so heavy until the day my daughter-in-law's family invited me to their home in suburban Dallas. My name is Nicole, I'm 62 years old, and for the past 18 years I've been hiding something massive from everyone I love. You see, while my son Daniel believes his mother barely scrapes by on a modest office job salary, the truth is I earn around $35,000 a month as chief financial officer of a Fortune 500 company. I could easily live in a mansion, drive luxury cars, vacation in exotic locations. But I chose a different path. I live in the same small 2-bedroom house I bought 23 years ago. I drive a 7-year-old sedan. I shop at discount stores. Not because I have to, but because I learned something most wealthy people never understand. Real peace doesn't come from what you own. It comes from who you are when nobody's watching. Daniel grew up thinking we lived paycheck to paycheck. I never corrected that impression because I wanted him to understand the value of hard work, to build his own success without depending on his mother's bank account. It worked beautifully. He graduated on scholarship, built a solid career in marketing, and 2 years ago he married Jessica, a woman who seemed sweet on the surface but always made me feel slightly uncomfortable. There was something calculated in her smiles, something rehearsed about her kindness. Then came the phone call that would expose everything I'd been sensing but couldn't prove. "Mom, Jessica's parents want to meet you properly," Daniel said one Thursday evening. "They're hosting a family dinner this Saturday at their place in Highland Park. Can you make it?" Highland Park, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Dallas, where even the modest homes cost over $2 million. I felt something shift in my chest, an instinct I'd learned to trust during decades of reading people in boardrooms. "What have you told them about me?" I asked carefully. There was a pause, brief but revealing. "Just that you work in an office, that you've always been independent and practical." The word practical came out like an apology, as if my supposed modest lifestyle was something embarrassing that needed explanation. "I'll be there," I said, but my mind was already working. After hanging up, I sat in my comfortable but unremarkable living room and made a decision that would change everything. If they expected to meet a struggling working-class mother, I would give them exactly that performance. I wanted to see how they'd treat someone they considered beneath them socially. Call it a test, call it manipulation, call it whatever you want. But after years of watching people reveal their true character based on perceived status, I needed to know who these people really were before they became permanent fixtures in my son's life. Saturday morning arrived with clear Texas skies. Instead of choosing from my collection of quality designer clothes hidden in the back of my closet, I went to the donation bag I kept for Goodwill. I pulled out a faded floral dress with a small stain near the hem that never quite came out. I found scuffed shoes with worn heels. I tied my hair in a messy bun with a drugstore hair tie. No makeup, no jewelry, not even my usual watch. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked tired, defeated, invisible. Exactly what I needed. In my worn canvas purse, I placed a basic debit card to maintain the illusion. But hidden in a secret zippered compartment, I kept my Platinum American Express card, the one with essentially no limit, just in case. The Uber dropped me off in front of a massive estate at exactly 6 o'clock that evening. The house was stunning, easily 7,000 square feet of modern architecture with perfectly manicured lawns and a circular driveway featuring a fountain. A uniformed housekeeper answered the door, and her smile faltered slightly when she saw my appearance. She recovered quickly, but I caught it. That microsecond of judgment, that flicker of surprise that someone dressed like me would be visiting this address. "You must be Daniel's mother," she said politely, stepping aside to let me enter. The interior was exactly what I expected. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, expensive artwork on every wall, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Everything screamed money, status. "Look at what we have." I heard voices coming from what appeared to be a formal dining room and walked toward them slowly, observing how the housekeeper watched me from the corner of her eye. When I entered the dining room, I saw Daniel standing near an elegantly set table, and beside him was Jessica, absolutely radiant in a cream designer dress with diamond earrings catching the light. Seated at the table were her parents, presumably. "Mom, you made it," Daniel said, coming over to hug me. His embrace was stiff, uncomfortable, and I saw confusion flash across his face as he took in my appearance. Jessica approached next, kissing my cheek quickly. "So glad you could come, Nicole." Her voice was warm, but her eyes were already assessing my outfit, my shoes, my complete lack of any visible quality. She turned to introduce me. "Mom, Dad, this is Nicole, Daniel's mother." Nicole, these are my parents, Richard and Margaret Patterson. Richard stood and extended his hand with a grip that lasted barely a second, weak and dismissive. Margaret simply nodded from her seat, her eyes scanning me from head to toe in about 3 seconds flat. Her verdict was written clearly on her pursed lips and raised eyebrows. "Please have a seat," Margaret said, gesturing to the chair furthest from her at the long dining table. I sat down and took in the setting. Fine china, crystal glasses, silver cutlery, fresh roses in an elaborate centerpiece. Everything was designed to impress, to establish hierarchy, to remind everyone present of their wealth. A server appeared with menus printed on heavy cardstock. I opened mine and pretended to struggle with the fancy descriptions. "There's so many choices," I said, letting my voice sound uncertain and overwhelmed. Margaret exchanged a quick glance with Richard. "Would you like me to order something for you?" she offered, her tone dripping with condescension. "That would be very kind," I replied, lowering my eyes submissively. Margaret called the server over and ordered without asking my preference. "She'll have the house salad and the chicken breast, plain preparation." Then, lowering her voice but not quite enough, she added to Richard, "It's the most affordable option on the menu." Daniel looked away, clearly uncomfortable with what he just heard. Jessica studied her water glass with unnecessary intensity, and so began one of the most revealing evenings of my entire life. Wine was poured. An expensive Napa Valley Cabernet that Richard made sure to mention cost $300 a bottle. "I only stock the finest in our cellar," he announced proudly. Margaret raised her glass for a toast. "To family," she said, with a deliberate pause before adding, "and to new connections." The hesitation before the word connections was intentional, a subtle message that I wasn't really considered family, just an inconvenient addition to be tolerated. The appetizers arrived, and the interrogation began disguised as polite conversation. "So, Nicole, Daniel mentioned you work as an administrative assistant?" Margaret asked, delicately cutting into her seared scallops. "Yes, I've been with the same company for many years," I replied, playing my role perfectly. "How stable?" She responded with zero genuine interest. "And you live alone in that little house Daniel described?" Richard interjected. "Yes, same place for over 20 years now," I confirmed, watching their reactions carefully. "How wonderful," Richard said, choosing his words like a chess player selecting moves. "So many people today are always chasing the next big thing. Bigger homes, newer cars. There's something to be said for knowing your place and being content with it." The condescension was breathtaking. They were literally praising me for staying in what they perceived as my lower social position, for not aspiring beyond my supposed limitations. Margaret nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Not everyone needs luxury. Simple lives can be quite fulfilling for simple people." My appetizer arrived, a basic mixed green salad that was visibly smaller than everyone else's elaborate first courses. Another calculated humiliation. "So, tell us about your recent vacation," I said, trying to redirect the conversation away from my fictional poverty. Margaret's face lit up immediately. "Oh, it was marvelous. We spent a month at our summer home in Martha's Vineyard. Nothing extravagant, just a 5-bedroom cottage with ocean views. We entertained several state senators and a few Fortune 500 executives. Networking opportunities, you understand." Richard added, "We also attended the governor's charity gala. $20,000 a plate event. All for a good cause, of course." Every word was a brick being laid, building a wall between us. Every reference to money, connections, and possessions was deliberate, designed to establish distance and superiority. "And you, Nicole?" Margaret asked with fake sweetness. "Do you travel much?" I shook my head. "Not really. Maybe visit family in Oklahoma once a year if I can afford it." Margaret made a small face as if I'd mentioned something distasteful. "Well, everyone does what they can with what they have, don't they?" The main course was served, and the pattern continued relentlessly. They talked endlessly about their lifestyle, their social events, their recent purchases, their exclusive country club membership. Occasionally, they'd toss a question my way, pretending interest, but their eyes glazed over before I finished answering. Daniel remained mostly silent, occasionally trying to change the subject. Jessica followed her parents' lead, adopting the same patronizing tone whenever she addressed me directly. Between the main course and dessert, Richard decided to dig deeper into my personal life with questions that felt more like an investigation than conversation. "Daniel told us you raised him completely alone," Richard said, leaning back in his chair. "That must have been incredibly difficult on such limited means." I nodded simply. "It had its challenges." Margaret chimed in with false sympathy. I really admire women like you who make do with whatever resources they have. Not everyone is born with opportunities and education. Her fake empathy was almost funny. I could practically see her thoughts. A woman with no formal education, no resources, no connections, barely scraping by. How sad. How do you feel seeing Daniel now? Margaret continued. Married to our Jessica, living in that beautiful condo downtown, building such a promising career. The implication was crystal clear. How did it feel knowing my son had risen above my station in life, transcended my limitations? Was I grateful? Intimidated? Both? I'm very proud of him, I answered honestly. He worked hard for everything he has. Richard nodded slowly. Yes, hard work matters, but it's also about having the right connections, being in the right circles. Fortunately, Jessica was able to introduce Daniel to some very influential people in the marketing world. I hadn't known that detail. Apparently, my son was receiving more help from his new family than he'd mentioned. Dad helped Daniel land that contract with the Morrison Group, Jessica said proudly. Just an introduction, Richard replied with false modesty. Daniel closed the deal himself, but sometimes all you need is to get your foot in the right door. The server brought desserts. Everyone received elaborate chocolate creations with gold leaf and exotic fruits. In front of me was placed a simple vanilla pudding cup. I ordered something light for you, Margaret explained sweetly. I know rich desserts can be overwhelming for people who aren't used to them. That's when I realized this wasn't just condescension anymore. This was active, deliberate cruelty. She was intentionally trying to humiliate me with every choice, every word, every gesture. Very thoughtful, I replied, keeping my voice neutral and my face blank. As we ate dessert, Margaret began discussing Daniel and Jessica's future without even consulting them first. They're planning to have children soon, she announced as if it were her decision alone. We're already looking at preschools. The Westminster Academy has a 3-year waiting list, but Richard knows the director. Westminster Academy, where tuition for 4-year-olds exceeded $30,000 annually, and children learned table manners before they learned to read. And you, Nicole? Margaret asked with a smile that never reached her cold eyes. What are your plans for the future? Still working, I assume? I nodded. Yes. I can't afford to retire yet. Need to keep working as long as I can. Margaret's smile widened like a predator finally cornering its prey. She put down her spoon and folded her hands on the table in a gesture that screamed, "This is a business discussion now." The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly. Richard sat up straighter as if preparing for a corporate negotiation. Daniel looked at Jessica confused, but she avoided his gaze, staring intently at her napkin in her lap. She knew what was coming. About that, Nicole, Margaret began, her voice taking on a falsely maternal tone. Richard and I have been talking and we're concerned about you. My heart rate didn't change, but every sense sharpened. Concerned? I asked, maintaining my innocent expression perfectly. Yes. Richard took over smoothly. You see, we understand that your financial situation might become more challenging as you age. Healthcare costs, housing expenses, everything keeps getting more expensive. And for someone with limited resources, well, we worry this might become a burden on Daniel and Jessica in the future. There it was. The real purpose of this entire dinner was finally revealing itself. A burden, I repeated softly, letting the word hang in the air between us like poison gas slowly spreading. Daniel is a wonderful son, Margaret explained as if talking to a child. He feels responsible for you, which is admirable. But Richard and I don't want that responsibility to interfere with the life he and Jessica are building together. They have their own future to think about, their own family to plan for. Daniel started to interrupt. Mom, please, this isn't... But Margaret patted his hand dismissively. It's fine, sweetheart. Your mother understands we're all thinking about her well-being here. Don't you, Nicole? I remained silent, giving them enough rope to hang themselves completely. What we'd like to propose, Richard continued, taking full control now, is an arrangement that benefits everyone involved. A financial support system for you, Nicole. He paused for effect. What kind of arrangement? I asked quietly. A modest monthly allowance, he said, as if offering me the world. We'd provide you with $800 a month. Not a fortune for us, but we imagine it would make a significant difference in your situation. Help you cover bills, maybe save a little. $800. I almost laughed out loud. That was less than I spent on a single business dinner with clients. And in exchange? I asked, because there was always an exchange with people like this. Margaret's smile flickered slightly. Well, it's not exactly an exchange, more like a mutual understanding between reasonable adults. Richard cleared his throat. We'd simply expect you to respect the young couple's privacy and independence, to understand they're building their own life with their own social circles and traditions. The message couldn't be clearer if they'd written it in neon lights. They wanted to pay me to disappear, to stay away, to not embarrass their daughter and son-in-law with my shabby clothes and working-class presence at their elegant social events. In other words, I translated slowly, you want me to keep my distance from my own son. Margaret had the audacity to look offended. No, that's not what we're saying at all. We just want everyone to find their appropriate place in this new family dynamic. My appropriate place, I repeated, tasting each word. Exactly, Margaret exclaimed as if I'd finally grasped a difficult concept. You'll always be Daniel's mother, of course. But now that he's married to Jessica, now that he's entering our social circle, there are certain expectations, certain standards to maintain. Daniel finally found his voice. This is completely unnecessary. My mother has never been a problem or an embarrassment. Margaret patted his hand again. Of course not, dear. No one's saying that. We're just being practical and forward-thinking. The server approached, asking if anyone wanted coffee. Richard ordered espressos for everyone without consulting me. Another small gesture that perfectly summarized the entire evening. My preferences, my opinions, my dignity were completely irrelevant to these people. While we waited for coffee, Margaret continued outlining how this arrangement would work, how they'd discreetly transfer money to my account each month, how I could use it to improve my quality of life, maybe buy better clothing. She glanced meaningfully at my stained dress. Of course, we'd still include you for major occasions, she added generously. Birthdays, maybe Christmas, the important family events. The coffee arrived. I took a sip of the bitter espresso and set the cup back down with a soft clink against the saucer. Decision time. I could continue this charade, humbly accept their insulting bribe, and watch how far their manipulation would go. Or I could end this performance right now and reveal exactly who they'd been treating like garbage all evening. I looked at my son, his face showing shame, confusion, and discomfort all at once. He was trapped between two worlds, his loyalty to his mother and his desire to please his new family. I looked at Jessica, who still avoided my eyes, focused on stirring sugar into coffee she hadn't asked for. I looked at Richard and Margaret, so confident in their superiority, so certain of their right to rearrange other people's lives according to their convenience. The decision crystallized instantly. $800 a month, I said thoughtfully. That's quite an offer. Margaret smiled, victory written across her face. I'm glad you see it reasonably. We really do want what's best for everyone. I nodded slowly. I'm curious, though. How did you arrive at that specific amount? Richard looked slightly annoyed at the question. It's an amount we deemed appropriate and generous given the circumstances. He emphasized the word generous. I see, I replied calmly. And how much did you give Daniel and Jessica for their condo down payment? If I remember correctly, units in that building start around $800,000. Margaret blinked, caught off guard by the sudden topic change. We gave them $120,000, a wedding gift. She couldn't hide the pride in her voice despite her confusion about where this was going. $120,000, I repeated. And their honeymoon in Italy? I read somewhere that luxury tours of Tuscany and the Amalfi Coast run about $25,000 for 2 weeks. Richard frowned. $32,000, actually. We wanted them to have the best experience possible. I nodded slowly. So in total, you've invested about $152,000 in the young couple. That's wonderful. Truly generous. Richard's frown deepened. We don't think of it as an investment. There are children. He said the word children with emphasis, excluding me from that category entirely. Of course. I agreed pleasantly. It's just an interesting choice of priorities. You invest over $150,000 in your daughter and her husband, but you're trying to buy off his inconvenient mother for $800 a month. That's less than $10,000 a year. Quite economical. The silence that fell over the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Margaret's smile vanished completely. Richard's jaw clenched, his knuckles white around his coffee cup. Jessica looked like she might cry, and Daniel, my son, appeared to be in complete shock. Nicole? Margaret said finally, her voice now ice cold. I think you're misunderstanding our intentions. We're only trying to help you. I set my napkin on the table and leaned back in my chair. My posture shifted subtly. No longer the timid, submissive woman I'd been playing all evening. Now my shoulders were straight, my chin raised, my eyes locked directly on theirs with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades in boardrooms negotiating million-dollar deals. Help, I said quietly. Interesting how that word can mean such different things depending on who's using it. I reached down for my worn canvas purse and placed it on the table. Let me tell you a story about someone you think you know, but really don't. Margaret and Richard exchanged confused glances. Daniel was watching me intently now. This woman started as a file clerk at an investment firm 32 years ago. She made minimum wage, lived in a studio apartment with cockroaches, ate ramen noodles for dinner most nights. Then she discovered she was pregnant. Daniel leaned forward slightly. He knew parts of this story, but never the full details I was about to reveal. The baby's father disappeared the moment he found out. Her family disowned her for getting pregnant outside marriage. She was completely alone with no support system whatsoever. Margaret shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting such personal details. She worked until the day she went into labor, came back 2 weeks after giving birth because she couldn't afford to take more time off. She worked 12, sometimes 14-hour shifts while a neighbor watched the baby. Weekends she studied. Night classes, professional certifications, business courses at the community college, languages learned from library books, all while raising a child alone. I paused, taking a slow sip of water. That woman climbed from file clerk to executive assistant, from assistant to department coordinator, from coordinator to senior analyst, from analyst to finance director, from director to vice president, and finally to chief financial officer. Richard's eyes narrowed. Margaret blinked rapidly like she was trying to process where this story was heading. Do you know how much that woman earns now, Margaret? Richard? They didn't respond, frozen in their chairs. $35,000 a month on average, not including annual bonuses, profit sharing, and company stock options. Daniel's fork clattered onto his plate with a loud metallic sound. Jessica went pale, all color draining from her face instantly. That's approximately $420,000 annually. Over the past 18 years, that adds up to more than $7.5 million in salary alone. Not counting investments, which is where most of that money actually went. Real estate portfolios, index funds, municipal bonds, tech stocks bought early. Margaret opened and closed her mouth several times, unable to form words. Her carefully constructed composure was crumbling in real time. Mom, Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. What are you saying? I smiled at him gently, lovingly. I'm saying, sweetheart, that your mother isn't who Richard and Margaret think she is. She isn't who you think she is either. I reached into my purse, past the basic debit card I'd brought for show. From the hidden zippered compartment, I pulled out my Platinum American Express card, the one reserved for corporate expenses with essentially unlimited credit. I placed it on the table directly in front of Margaret. The card gleamed under the chandelier light. Nicole Bradford, Chief Financial Officer, engraved in raised silver letters. So about your generous offer of $800 a month to make me disappear from my son's life, I said calmly. I'm going to have to decline. You see, I spend more than that on a single pair of business shoes. The silence that followed was absolute and crushing. Margaret stared at the card like it was a venomous snake about to strike. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red, veins visible at his temples. Jessica was trembling, tears forming in her eyes. Daniel looked completely shattered, like his entire understanding of reality had just been demolished. Why? Daniel asked, his voice cracking. Why did you never tell me? I turned to face him fully, my expression softening. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing people for who they are, not what they have. I wanted you to build your own path without depending on your mother's money or status. I wanted you to understand the value of work, persistence, and genuine humility. My voice was gentle but firm. But you let me believe all these years. He continued, pain evident in every word. You let me think we struggled, that you were just a simple office worker barely making ends meet. Yes, I admitted without hesitation. And look at you now. Graduated with honors, built your own successful career without handouts or nepotism, married someone you love. Would any of that have happened if I'd raised you in a mansion, given you everything you wanted, taught you that money solves all problems? Richard finally found his voice, though it shook slightly. This is outrageous. You deliberately deceived us, made us look like fools. I turned my gaze back to him, and he actually flinched slightly. I deceived you? I asked quietly, dangerously. All I did was show up in simple clothes. Everything else, every assumption, every insult, every humiliating gesture, that was all you. Margaret tried to recover some dignity. You set us up. You came here with this charade specifically to embarrass us. Her voice was shrill now, defensive. I came here, I corrected her firmly, to see how you'd treat someone you considered beneath you socially. Someone with no money, no connections, no value in your narrow worldview. And you failed that test spectacularly. I gestured around the opulent dining room. All this wealth, all these possessions, all your social connections, and you still don't understand the most basic human decency. Treating people with respect regardless of their bank account. The server appeared nervously asking if anyone wanted anything else. The tension was so thick he probably felt it from the kitchen. Actually, yes, I said clearly. I'll take the check. Richard moved to intercept. That's not necessary. We invited you. But I was faster, holding up my hand. No, I insist. Consider it my contribution to this incredibly educational evening. When the server returned with the bill on a silver tray, I saw the total. $2,300 for dinner for 5 people. Without hesitating, I placed my platinum card on the tray. Richard and Margaret watched in stunned silence. While we waited for the card to process, I turned back to my son. Daniel, I'm sorry I never told you the truth, but understand that I did it out of love, not deception. I wanted you to become the man you are today, someone who earned everything through merit, not privilege. Daniel shook his head slowly, still processing. All those years. The small house, the old car, the budget vacations, telling me we couldn't afford things. All of it was a choice, not a necessity. He sounded almost betrayed. Every bit of it, I confirmed. I didn't need a mansion. I don't need designer clothes or exotic vacations to feel fulfilled or valuable. Jessica finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Nicole, I didn't know. About tonight, about what my parents were planning. I swear I didn't know they were going to offer you money to stay away. I studied her face carefully, looking for deception but finding only genuine shame and horror. I hope that's true, Jessica, because if you did know and said nothing, that would tell me everything I need to know about your character. She shook her head vigorously. I didn't. I promise. I knew they wanted to meet you properly, but I never imagined they'd do something like this. Margaret found her voice again, though it lacked its earlier confidence. You have to understand, Nicole. We were only thinking about what's best for our daughter and her future. We didn't want her burdened with financial responsibilities for someone who seemed to be struggling. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. Financial responsibilities? Margaret, I have a higher net worth than you and Richard combined. I could buy your summer home in Martha's Vineyard without noticing the dent in my accounts. That wasn't actually true. I didn't know their exact net worth, but the point landed perfectly. Their faces went slack with shock. The real tragedy here, I continued, my voice softer now but no less powerful, is that you measure people entirely by their financial status. You see someone in worn clothes and immediately decide they're less worthy of respect, less deserving of dignity. You never once considered that maybe I chose simplicity over ostentation, that maybe I value different things than you do. Richard tried to interrupt. Now wait just a moment. But I held up my hand. No, you wait. You spent this entire evening treating me like I was beneath you, ordering the cheapest items on the menu for me, offering me money like charity, planning to push me out of my son's life, all because you judged me by my appearance. The server returned with my card and receipt. I signed it, adding a $500 tip. The server's eyes widened, and he thanked me profusely. Margaret watched this transaction with growing horror, finally understanding just how badly she'd miscalculated. So here's what's going to happen now, I said, standing up from the table. I'm going to leave. Daniel, when you're ready to talk, really talk, you know where to find me. I'll always be there for you. No conditions, no manipulation, no strings attached. Just love. I looked at Jessica. And you, I hope tonight taught you something about judging people by appearances. I picked up my worn canvas purse, that cheap prop that had served its purpose perfectly. As for you, Richard and Margaret, I want you to think about something. You have all this wealth, all these connections, all this social status. But what do you actually have if you can't treat people with basic human decency? If you measure worth only in dollars and cents? If you think money gives you the right to control and manipulate others? Margaret's face had gone from pale to flushed, anger and humiliation mixing visibly. You came into our home under false pretenses. You made fools of us deliberately. No, I corrected her firmly. You made fools of yourselves. I simply gave you the opportunity to show who you really are when you think nobody important is watching. I started to walk toward the door, then stopped and turned back one final time. Oh, and about that arrangement you proposed, the $800 a month? Here's my counteroffer. I'll give you $10,000 right now if you can tell me one single time you treated someone without money or status with genuine kindness and respect. Just one time. The silence was deafening. Richard and Margaret stared at me, speechless. Neither could answer. That's what I thought, I said quietly. I walked through their magnificent home, past the expensive art and designer furniture, past the crystal and marble and gold fixtures. None of it impressed me. I'd learned long ago that wealth without character is just expensive emptiness. The housekeeper opened the front door for me. "Have a good evening, ma'am," she said, and there was something in her eyes, a flicker of satisfaction, as if she'd witnessed my performance and secretly cheered for me. "You too," I replied warmly, treating her with the respect Margaret and Richard never would. I called an Uber and stood on their circular driveway waiting, breathing in the cool Dallas night air. I felt lighter than I had in years. The secret I'd carried for so long was finally out. The test I'd designed had revealed exactly what I'd suspected about Jessica's parents. And now, whatever happened next, at least everything was honest and exposed. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom, please don't leave yet. We need to talk." I looked back at the house and saw him standing in the doorway, silhouette against the bright interior lights. "Cancel the ride," I texted back. "I'll wait." Daniel came outside alone, closing the door behind him. He walked over slowly, his expression a complicated mix of emotions I couldn't quite read. "That was," he started, then stopped, searching for words. "That was the most incredible and terrifying thing I've ever witnessed." I smiled slightly. I probably could have handled it more diplomatically. He actually laughed, a short, shocked sound. "Are you kidding? That was perfect. Absolutely perfect. They deserved every second of it." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he'd done since childhood when overwhelmed. "But Mom, why? Why hide all this from me for my entire life?" I took his hand gently. "Because I watched too many wealthy families raise entitled children who never understood the value of anything. I watched privilege destroy character. I didn't want that for you, Daniel. I wanted you to know what it felt like to work hard, to earn things, to appreciate what you had because you built it yourself, not because Mommy's money bought it." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "All those times I worried about you. Worried about your retirement, about if you could afford health care, about whether you were okay financially. And the whole time you were," he couldn't even finish the sentence. "I'm sorry for that worry," I said sincerely. "But look what it created. A son who cares about his mother's well-being, who stayed connected despite building his own life, who never took me for granted. Would you have been that person if you'd grown up knowing I was wealthy?" He thought about that for a long moment. "Probably not," he admitted quietly. "I probably would have been insufferable. Maybe even like," he gestured back toward the house, "like them." I nodded. "Exactly. And you're nothing like them, Daniel. You're kind, hardworking, humble. That's worth more than any amount of money I could have given you." We stood there in silence for a moment, processing everything. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "Jessica is in there completely devastated. She's mortified by her parents' behavior. She's crying and saying she never knew they were capable of being so cruel." I felt a pang of sympathy. "She's not responsible for her parents' actions, Daniel, but she does need to decide who she wants to be. Will she follow their example or choose a different path?" Daniel nodded slowly. "She's already talking about setting boundaries with them, about not accepting their money anymore if it comes with conditions and control." "That's a good start," I said. "But it's also incredibly hard to break away from that kind of family dynamic. They'll push back. They'll use money as leverage. Are you both prepared for that?" Daniel took a deep breath. "I think so. I mean, we have good jobs. We can handle our own expenses. We don't actually need their financial support." He paused. "And apparently I have a mother who's secretly a financial executive, so I'm not exactly coming from poverty." I laughed despite everything. "Don't even think about it. You're not getting a penny until you've earned your own success. That rule doesn't change just because the secret's out." He smiled, genuine warmth in his expression. "I wouldn't want it any other way. That's how you raised me." We hugged then, a real embrace, longer and tighter than we had in years. When we pulled apart, I saw Jessica standing in the doorway watching us. She looked small and fragile, nothing like the confident woman I'd met before. "Can I talk to you, Nicole?" she called out hesitantly. I nodded and walked back toward the house. Daniel squeezed my hand once and went inside, leaving Jessica and me alone on the front steps. Jessica's eyes were red from crying. Her carefully applied makeup streaked and ruined. "I don't even know how to apologize for what you experienced tonight," she began, her voice shaking. "I've been thinking about every interaction we've had, and I'm realizing I've probably been just as condescending and judgmental as my parents without even realizing it." I appreciated her honesty. Self-awareness is the first step toward change. I said gently. But recognition isn't enough. The question is, what are you going to do differently? She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very young despite being 30 years old. I don't know. I've lived my entire life in this bubble where money and status were the most important things, where the right schools, the right clubs, the right friends mattered more than actual character. Your parents taught you their values, I said. That's natural. But now you're an adult capable of choosing your own values. The question is, are you brave enough to choose differently, even if it means disappointing them? Jessica nodded slowly. I think tonight opened my eyes. Watching how they treated you, hearing the things they said. I was horrified, Nicole. Genuinely horrified. Because I realized that's how they probably treat everyone they consider beneath them socially. Service workers, people in modest jobs, anyone who doesn't fit their definition of success. She looked at me with raw vulnerability. Is that who I am too? I considered my answer carefully. I think you've been shaped by their influence, yes. But I also see someone who's questioning those values right now. Someone who's uncomfortable with what she witnessed tonight. That discomfort is important, Jessica. Don't ignore it. She wiped tears from her cheeks. I told them I'm ashamed of them. My mother started crying and saying I was being ungrateful. My father said you manipulated the situation to make them look bad. They're refusing to accept any responsibility. That didn't surprise me at all. People like your parents rarely do. Admitting fault would require examining their entire worldview, and that's terrifying. Jessica looked back at the house. They want Daniel and me to cut ties with you. They said if we maintain a relationship with you after you humiliated them like this, they'll stop all financial support. No more help with the mortgage, no more birthday gifts, no more family vacations, nothing. I raised my eyebrows. And what did you say? She met my eyes directly. I said we'd manage without their money, that some things are more important than financial comfort. Daniel agreed. We're prepared to do this on our own. I felt unexpected pride. That's not an easy choice, Jessica. Their money comes with a lot of perks you're accustomed to. I know, she admitted. But staying connected to it means accepting their control, their values, their way of treating people. After tonight, I can't do that anymore. She took a shaky breath. Nicole, I need to ask you something important. Do you think I can change? Do you think it's possible for someone raised the way I was to become genuinely different? I looked at this young woman, vulnerable and questioning everything she'd been taught. Yes, I said firmly. I absolutely think you can change, but it requires constant awareness, constant effort to examine your assumptions and biases. It won't be easy, and you'll make mistakes. The question is whether you're committed to the work. Jessica nodded, determination replacing some of the uncertainty in her eyes. I am. I want to be someone Daniel can be proud of, someone our future children can look up to, not someone who judges people by their bank accounts or treats service workers like they're invisible. I smiled at her. Then start tomorrow. Notice how you interact with every person you encounter. The barista making your coffee, the person cleaning your office building, the grocery store cashier. Do you see them as people with their own stories and dignity, or as convenient fixtures in your life? She absorbed this seriously. I'll start paying attention, really paying attention. We heard raised voices from inside the house. Margaret's shrill tone carried through the walls. I cannot believe the disrespect, the absolute audacity. After everything we've done for them. Jessica sighed heavily. They've been like this since you left, going back and forth between rage and playing the victim. I wasn't surprised. They're losing control, and that terrifies them more than anything. Control is how they've always operated. Jessica looked torn. Should I go back in? Try to calm them down? I shook my head. That's not your responsibility. You're not required to manage their emotions or protect them from the consequences of their own actions. Jessica seemed relieved to hear that. Can I ask you something else? Why did you really keep your success a secret? I understand wanting Daniel to work hard, but wasn't it also about something more? She was perceptive. I nodded slowly. Yes. I grew up with nothing, Jessica. Absolute poverty. When I finally started earning real money, I discovered something unexpected. The wealth didn't make me happier. The big house I could afford felt empty. The luxury car didn't change who I was. All those things people chase, they're just things. So I chose simplicity because it brought me peace that consumption never could. But you still work, Jessica pointed out. You still earn that salary. If money doesn't matter, why not retire? I smiled. Because the work matters. The challenge of solving complex financial problems, the satisfaction of building something, the relationships with colleagues, the sense of purpose. That's what fulfills me, not the paycheck. The money is just a byproduct. Jessica thought about this. I've never thought about success that way. For my parents, for me until tonight, success was always about acquisition. More money, bigger houses, fancier cars, exclusive clubs. It was all about having more than other people. That's exhausting, I said simply. There's always someone with more, always a bigger house, a fancier car, a higher status. If your happiness depends on being above others, you'll never actually be happy. Jessica wrapped her arms around herself against the cool night air. I feel like I'm seeing everything clearly for the first time, and it's overwhelming. Like my entire foundation was built on sand, and now it's shifting. I put my hand on her shoulder. That's growth, Jessica. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Stick with it. Talk to Daniel. Build your own values together as a couple. Don't let your parents' worldview become yours by default. Daniel came back outside looking exhausted. They're not calming down. Dad's threatening to cut me out of his will. Mom's saying we've betrayed the family. It's getting ugly in there. He looked at both of us. I think we should leave. Go back to our place and figure things out without them screaming in the background. Jessica nodded immediately. Yes. Let's go. She turned to me. Nicole, would you come with us? I know it's late, but I'm not ready for this conversation to end. I checked my watch. It was nearly 11 o'clock. Are you sure? It's been a long night for everyone. Please, Daniel added. We have a lot to talk about. A lot I need to understand about who you really are, about your career, about the choices you made. And honestly, I don't want this night to end with me still processing everything alone. I smiled at both of them. All right, let me call another Uber. As we waited for the car, Margaret appeared in the doorway. Jessica, Daniel, you're not seriously leaving with her after what she did? Her voice was sharp, accusing. Daniel turned to face his mother-in-law. After what she did? Mom tried to pay my mother $800 a month to stay away from me. You ordered her the cheapest food on the menu. You treated her like garbage all night. That's what happened here. Margaret's face flushed. She deceived us. She came here pretending to be something she wasn't. I stepped forward. No, Margaret. I came here as exactly who I am, just without expensive clothes to distract you. Everything else, every judgment, every insult, every condescending word, that was all your choice. I just gave you the opportunity to show your true character, and you took it. Richard appeared behind Margaret. You need to leave our property immediately. You're no longer welcome here. I nodded calmly. That was already my plan. But understand this. Your daughter and son-in-law are adults capable of making their own choices. Threatening them financially just proves everything I observed about you tonight. The Uber pulled up, ending the confrontation. The three of us got in without another word to Richard and Margaret. As we drove away, I looked back and saw them standing in their doorway, lit from behind by the chandelier light, looking smaller somehow despite their massive house and massive wealth. Jessica was crying quietly in the middle seat. Daniel had his arm around her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry you both have to deal with my family. Daniel kissed her forehead. Hey, we're dealing with it together. That's what matters. And honestly, my secretly wealthy executive mother just took them down so spectacularly that I'm still processing it. That broke the tension slightly. Jessica laughed through her tears. It really was spectacular. The moment you put that platinum card on the table, I thought my mother might actually faint. I smiled. I've been in negotiations where revealing information at the right moment changes everything. Tonight was just applying those same principles. Daniel shook his head in amazement. Chief Financial Officer. My mom is a CFO of a Fortune 500 company. I still can't believe it. What company? I named it, and both of their eyes went wide. That's massive, Daniel said. Like, you're probably on lists of most powerful executives in Texas. How did I never know? I kept my professional and personal lives completely separate, I explained. At work, I'm Nicole Bradford, CFO, making decisions that affect thousands of employees and billions in assets. At home, I was just your mom who made spaghetti on Wednesdays and helped with homework. Jessica looked at me with new understanding. That must have been exhausting. Living two completely different lives. I considered that. Sometimes. But it also kept me grounded, made sure I never lost sight of what actually mattered, which was never the money or status. It was always the relationships, the person I was becoming, the values I lived by. We arrived at Daniel and Jessica's condo in downtown Dallas. It was nice, modern, probably 1,200 square feet with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. They'd decorated tastefully, but clearly with money, designer furniture, and expensive art. I wondered how much of it was their taste versus trying to meet Jessica's parents' expectations. Daniel made coffee, while Jessica changed out of her formal dress into comfortable clothes. When we were all settled in their living room, Daniel started the conversation I knew was coming. "Mom, I need you to help me understand. Walk me through how this happened. How did you go from file clerk to CFO?" So I told them. The whole story this time, nothing held back. Starting as a file clerk at 23 years old, pregnant and alone, working every possible overtime hour, studying at night after Daniel went to sleep, taking free courses wherever I could find them, learning software, finance principles, business management. I was promoted to executive assistant after 3 years, I explained. My boss recognized that I was capable of more than filing and answering phones. She started giving me analytical projects, teaching me financial modeling. She became my mentor. Daniel listened intently, learning details of my life he'd never known. By the time you were in elementary school, I was a senior analyst making about $60,000 a year. That's when things started improving financially, when we could afford a slightly better apartment, when I stopped buying only clearance groceries. I continued. But I never changed our lifestyle dramatically because I didn't want you to notice the shift. I wanted you to keep valuing the same things, working hard in school, appreciating what we had. Jessica asked, "When did you become CFO?" I smiled at the memory. 12 years ago. I was 49, which is relatively young for that position, but I'd proven myself repeatedly, navigated the company through 2 major financial restructurings, built a reputation for being brilliant with numbers and strategy. "And the salary?" Daniel asked quietly. "Started at $28,000 monthly. It's increased to $35,000 with bonuses and raises over the years." I said the numbers plainly, watching them process. "I own my house outright, paid in cash 13 years ago. I drive an old car by choice, not necessity. Most of my income goes into investments and retirement accounts. Some goes to quiet charitable giving that nobody knows about." Jessica looked amazed. "You could live anywhere, do anything, buy whatever you want, but you choose to live simply." I nodded. "Because I learned that more doesn't mean better. It just means more." Daniel stood up and paced to the window, staring out at the city lights. "I'm processing a lot of emotions right now, Mom. I'm amazed by what you accomplished. I'm proud of you, but I'm also kind of angry that you never trusted me with the truth. I understood that. Your anger is valid. I made a choice that affected you without your input. But Daniel, I need you to understand, I wasn't keeping this secret because I didn't trust you. I kept it because I loved you enough to let you struggle a little, to let you build your own character and success. Would you trade who you are now for having grown up rich?" He thought about that for a long time. Finally, he turned back to face me. "No," he admitted. "I wouldn't. If I'd grown up knowing we were wealthy, I probably would have been lazy, entitled, expecting everything to be handed to me. Like," he stopped himself, "like some people we know." Jessica flinched but didn't argue. "But Mom, what happens now? Do you keep living in that small house? Keep driving that old car? Keep pretending even though the secret's out?" I smiled. "Why would I change? I like my life exactly as it is. The secret was never about the lifestyle. It was about protecting you from certain knowledge until you were strong enough to handle it." We talked until almost 3 in the morning. I answered every question they had about my career, my finances, my choices. Daniel asked about my work, what I actually did all day, what kind of decisions I made. Jessica asked about how I navigated being a woman in executive leadership, what challenges I faced, how I dealt with discrimination and bias. They both asked about the future, what my plans were, whether I'd ever retire. "Eventually," I said. "But not yet. I still love the work. I'm good at it. When that changes, when I'm ready, then I'll step back. But I'll never live extravagantly. Eventually," I said. "But not yet. I still love the work. I'm good at it. When that changes, when I'm ready, then I'll step back. But I'll never live extravagantly. That's just not who I am, regardless of what's in my bank account." Daniel sat back down beside Jessica, taking her hand. "What do we do about her parents? They're going to keep pushing, keep trying to control things with money and ultimatums." I leaned forward slightly. "You set boundaries, clear, firm boundaries. You tell them you love them, but you won't tolerate disrespect toward anyone in your family, including me. You make it clear that financial support comes with no strings attached, or you don't want it at all." Jessica nodded slowly. "That's going to cause a massive fight. They'll see it as betrayal, as choosing your mother over them." She looked at me. Which I guess in a way it is, but not because you're wealthy. Because you treated this situation with more grace and dignity than they ever could have. I appreciated that. This isn't about choosing sides, Jessica. It's about choosing values. What kind of people do you want to be? What kind of marriage do you want to build? What will you teach your future children about how to treat others? Those questions hung in the air between us, heavy with importance. Daniel spoke quietly. I want to be the kind of person who treats everyone with respect regardless of their circumstances. I want to raise children who understand that character matters more than cash. I want a marriage built on our own foundation, not controlled by external money and expectations. Jessica squeezed his hand. Me too. All of that. She turned to me. Nicole, I know I have a long way to go. Years of conditioning don't disappear in one night, but I promise you, I'm committed to becoming better. To examining my biases, to treating people differently, to building my own value system instead of just accepting my parents' version. I smiled warmly at her. That's all anyone can ask, Jessica. Growth, awareness, and genuine effort. You'll make mistakes. You'll catch yourself thinking or acting in old patterns. What matters is that you recognize it and correct course. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the evening finally settling. Daniel looked at me with new eyes, seeing perhaps for the first time the complete person I was, not just the limited version I'd shown him. Mom, can I ask you something? Do you have regrets? About the secrecy? About the choices you made? I thought carefully before answering. Some days, yes. Days when I wanted to help you more financially and couldn't without revealing everything. Days when you worried about me unnecessarily. But overall, no, I don't regret raising you the way I did. You became an incredible man, Daniel. Hardworking, humble, kind, grateful for what you have. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens through intentional parenting, through teaching values by living them, not just talking about them. My voice softened. And tonight, as awful as it was in some ways, it revealed something I needed to know. It showed me exactly who Jessica's parents are, how they treat people they consider beneath them. Better to know that now than discover it slowly over years. Daniel nodded. They failed your test pretty spectacularly. I smiled slightly. It wasn't really a test for them. It was a test for me, to see if I could trust them with you, with any future grandchildren. Jessica looked stricken. And we failed. Or rather, my parents failed. I reached over and took her hand gently. No, sweetheart. Your parents failed. But you and Daniel, you're still writing your story. Tonight was just the first chapter of you both choosing your own path, your own values. That's not failure. That's courage. She started crying again, but these were different tears. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving us a chance to be better than where we came from. We sat together until the sky outside started lightening with the first hints of dawn. Finally, I stood up, exhaustion hitting me fully. I should go home. Let you both get some sleep. Daniel stood quickly. Stay here. It's almost morning anyway. Take our guest room. We can have breakfast together. Keep talking if you want. Part of me wanted to maintain my independence, to return to my own space. But another part recognized this as an important moment, a chance to rebuild our relationship on this new foundation of complete honesty. All right, I agreed. But I'm making breakfast. And I warn you, CFO or not, I still make the same simple scrambled eggs and toast I always did. Daniel laughed. I wouldn't want it any other way, Mom. I wouldn't want it any other way. The next few weeks brought significant changes. Richard and Margaret made good on their threat, cutting off all financial support to Daniel and Jessica. The young couple adjusted, creating a budget, making lifestyle changes, learning to live within their own means without parental subsidies. It was challenging, but also liberating. Jessica started therapy to work through years of toxic values around money and status. She began volunteering at a community center, teaching financial literacy to low-income families. The work humbled her and opened her eyes to realities she'd never considered. She called me weekly to talk through her experiences, her realizations, her ongoing growth. Daniel and I rebuilt our relationship on complete honesty. He visited my office one day, seeing for the first time the professional environment where I spent my days. He met my colleagues, saw the respect they showed me, observed me in meetings making decisions that affected millions of dollars. Afterward, he told me he finally understood why I did what I did. You didn't want me to see you as Nicole Bradford, powerful executive, he said. You wanted me to know you as just Mom. And that gift, that normalcy, that's what made me who I am. I eventually met with Richard and Margaret one more time, at their request, months after that disastrous dinner. They offered what passed for an apology in their world, carefully worded to avoid accepting full responsibility. I listened politely and then told them the truth. I don't need your apology, but your daughter and son-in-law deserve better than the conditional love you've shown them. Money isn't love. Control isn't love. If you want a real relationship with them, with any future grandchildren, you need to examine your values deeply and honestly. I don't know if they ever did that work. Some people are too invested in their worldview to change, but that wasn't my problem to solve. My job was simply to protect my son and support his marriage as he and Jessica built something authentic together. As for me, I continue living in my modest house, driving my old car, working in my high-powered job, and finding joy in the simplicity I chose long ago. The secret is out, but my life hasn't changed, because the secret was never the point. The point was always about raising a son who valued character over cash, who treated everyone with dignity, who built his own success through merit and hard work. And in that, despite the unconventional method, despite the years of secrecy, despite everything, I succeeded completely. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or opportunity. Sometimes it's letting them struggle just enough to discover their own strength. So that's my story. A mother who hid her wealth to raise a son with real values. A test that exposed true character. A family learning that money can't buy the things that truly matter. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own values around money and status, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been judged based on your appearance or perceived financial status? How did you handle it? What values are you trying to instill in your own children or in the people around you? Share your experiences with our community. And if you found value in this story, please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future stories about real people navigating complex family dynamics, moral dilemmas, and the unexpected ways life tests our character. Remember, true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in the relationships we build, the values we live by, and the person we become when no one's watching. Thanks for listening to my story. I'll see you in the next video.